You're listening to the Sex and Psychology Podcast, the sex ed you never got in school and won't get anywhere else. I am your host, Dr. Justin Lehmiller. I am a social psychologist and research fellow at the Kinsey Institute and author of the book, Tell Me What You Want, The Science of Sexual Desire and How It Can Help You Improve Your Sex Life. Sex shops are often thought of as places where you can go to buy things, and certainly there's a lot you can buy at one of these stores. But for a lot of people, they've also served as some of the most accessible sources of sex education. When formal sex ed falls short and shame keeps people from asking questions elsewhere, sex shops often step in to fill in the gaps. In today's show, we're going to talk about the role that sex shops have played in shaping how people learn about sex and discover what it is that brings them pleasure. This is a conversation about sex shops not just as businesses, but as cultural and educational institutions, and what we can learn from the ones that have tried to do it right. My guest is Dr. Carol Queen, the staff sexologist, company historian, and curator of the Antique Vibrator Museum at Good Vibrations. A noted cultural sexologist whose work has been widely published, she's written and edited several books, including the Sex and Pleasure book, Good Vibrations Guide to Great Sex for Everyone. This is going to be another fascinating conversation. Stick around, and we're going to jump in right after the break. Do you ever find yourself dreaming about a career where you get to talk about sex and psychology all day long? What if I told you there's a place that can connect you with world-class experts and has a large, thriving community? Sexual Health Alliance does just that. Sexual Health Alliance helps you to build the career of your dreams and is at the forefront of sexuality education. Students come from all parts of the world and from all types of backgrounds. Whether you're in school just starting out on your journey or building advanced skills in your profession, Sexual Health Alliance's comprehensive certifications, engaging events, and self-paced online education will move you beyond the basics and set you up to become sexceptional. Visit sexualhealthalliance.com and start building the sexuality career of your dreams today. And let them know that you heard about Sexual Health Alliance on this podcast. Hi, Carol, and welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be with you, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. So we're going to be talking all about sex shops in this episode. Now, sex shops actually play a really important role in shaping sexual knowledge, but people don't necessarily always think of them as educational spaces. So let's start there. What role have sex shops historically played in terms of how people learn about sex, especially when you think about the fact that we live in a world where there are lots of gaps in our sexual knowledge that were just never filled by more traditional sex ed?
Well, even for those people who came up in internet land, who think of the internet as the place to go to find out information, sex shops can still play a really significant role. But I want to just also remind everyone who goes to the internet for knowledge that, one, it didn't always exist. There always had to be some way to find out the answer to a question you had, and it wasn't always easy to do, particularly if it had to do with sex. And the other is that the internet, especially now with AI, is a wheat and chaff situation. And if you know enough to go on the internet to search, wisely and well, you'll probably get the information you're looking for. And if you don't have background, it's easy to be led astray. So in both of those contexts, having a door that you can walk into somewhere, and of course, not every place has a sex shop, but there are more maybe than people think of, is a place where you can go and talk to a human being who spends all their time surrounded by the accoutrements of pleasure, the accoutrements of sexual health, particularly if it was a women-founded shop, like Good Vibrations, like Babeland, but there are others too, where you can walk in and find out more about Kegels, where you can go in and find out whether the lubes that you have been, or the stuff from the kitchen that you've been using as a lube will really work as well as what's in the bottle there. Information about safer sex, just all kinds of information. And of course, I've been at Good Vibes since 1990. I'm the staff sexologist. I do the training. We used to do it live in a room. Now we've got it on the internet at least, but it's a way to get everybody who works at the company ready to go talk about sex to the customers, and even places that we used to, market ourselves against. I call them, it's a formal term, dirty bookstores. Even those places, nevertheless, have a human and a bunch of options. And they are better than not knowing who to ask at all. And really, the heart of my answer to the question that you're asking is when people have a sex question, when they have a dilemma, it weighs on them. Mm-hmm. There needs to be someone, you and I might talk for a couple of seconds and say, maybe a sex therapist would be a good resource for this person. Not everyone has that access or is willing to be that vulnerable. And if going into a place that has a little bit more of a light tone starts them on a path of being able to ask questions, say what they are interested in, say what they need, well, good. That's what's kept me at Good Vibes all these years. It's because we play a role that isn't played everywhere else. We want good sex education. We don't have good sex education.
Yeah, I think everything you're saying is so true. I mean, sex is such a taboo topic of discussion for so many people. Many of us don't even feel like we can talk about it with our partners, right?
Right.
And so there aren't a lot of safe places for many people to go to talk about sex. And, I think a sex shop can serve as a place where it's like, well, sex is their business. So this is a place where you could certainly go and have your questions answered. And it wouldn't seem weird or out of place to talk about sex in that environment. So you mentioned Good Vibrations as a shop that you've worked at for quite some time. And Good Vibrations is a place that has always positioned itself kind of differently from the stereotypical quote unquote dirty bookstore or novelty shop. So what was radical or different about Good Vibrations when it first emerged? Like, what was it trying to do? Or what was the gap that it was trying to fill that other shops weren't really doing?
Well, the simple answer to that question is that Joni Blank, the founder of Good Vibrations, felt strongly that women in the late 1970s, 1977 is when Good Vibes began, would not feel comfortable in the old school novelty sex stores. It would be off-putting, dangerous seeming, and so forth. And when I'm telling this story to anyone, I always say, now there were some women in the 1970s who weren't scared to go into dirty bookstores, and I tried to keep track of what was going on out there in those years. But I think that Joni had a point in that nobody in the original spate of sex stores had spent a lot of time thinking about what if women were our primary customer base. And that's specifically what Joni set out to do. She did it because she was working with Lonnie Barbach in the pre-orgasmic women's groups up at UCSF Medical Center here in San Francisco, a consciousness-raising group / therapy group, which helped women have those, what we called in the 70s, the click moment of, I'm not the only one that happens to. I'm not the only one who feels that way, right? So it was almost this anthropological, sociological space as much as anything else. Over and over, they suggested that women try using a vibrator to move past their pre-orgasmic state, if that was going to be helpful, and often it was. And over, Joni heard them say, I could never go into one of those places. Mm-hmm. They were off-put and frightened and whatever it was that they were. And Joni finally said, aha, I know what I can do to make a difference for the women who need to have a comfortable place to go find a vibrator. Now, you could go find one at department stores. Still, that's always been true in the history of the consumer available vibrator ever since the doctors, let go of them in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. But most people didn't know that was the case. And even so, the woman who started the store in New York, the very first women-owned store in the country, Eve's Garden, that woman went into Macy's and got sexually harassed in there because she picked up a vibrator and took it to the counter. So there did need to be a place where women were centered. And that was what Good Vibes started out to do. But Joni had two rules associated with that. She broke that down into two main needs. One is try to get as good quality stuff in there for them to explore with as possible. No junk. And make sure that they have the information that they need to explore mindfully, meaningfully, that they understand what arousal and orgasm even are, if possible, while they search for one. Because even today, I hear people coming in complaining that they're not having orgasms. And if I go to the question, are you getting really aroused in your search for that orgasm? people don't know the link between arousal and orgasm. And while it's possible to have an orgasmic response without any arousal, it's unusual. And it's not what most people are ever going to expect. And so Joni needed there to be enough sex ed built in to make an end run around the terrible sex ed that most people had, including no sex ed at all. But also what came forward after that, of course, was abstinence only, abuse the girls, especially by saying that they were like gum on a shoe. Come on. How are we supposed to have a good relationship to our bodies, our sexuality, our partners, any of it, pleasure, if we have been essentially insulted about wanting to have any of that experience in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I love that story. And, Good Vibrations, I think, really became famous for the way that it trains its staff and for offering in-store education because, it was doing something that nobody else at the time was really doing. I think a lot of other sex shops in recent years have really made education a core part of their mission. I think in part because they've realized that, in order to sell your products and to get people to come in the door, you have to make it feel like a safe space where people are going to be knowledgeable and they can answer your questions. Because how are you supposed to know, which toy to pick up off the shelf? Because there are so many different options. How do you figure out the one that's right for you and your body? And so having those employees who are, really highly knowledgeable and who can also put customers at ease is really important. I hear from a lot of people who are afraid to go into a sex shop because they think they're going to feel awkward and uncomfortable. And if you have an employee who can't put people at ease, they're probably not going to want to come back to that shop. And so I think you have to be a really skilled person to work in a sex shop because not only do you have to be a good sex educator, but you also have to be really skilled at putting people at ease and talking about a topic that they might find really challenging to talk about with anyone.
Right. And as we know, if we specialize in this stuff, way back in the 1970s, the terrific theorist and psychologist Jack Annan, and sexologist, came up with a implicit model that suggests to us that the main thing that most people need in sex therapy or walking into a sex store is permission and information. And the permission is that piece of how a person approaches you, how welcome they make you feel. Nobody is saying in so many words, well, not nobody because some people need it, but mainly we're not saying you have every right to be here. You have every right to have pleasure. Some people do need to hear what is the text that they're going to write on their Post-it note affirmation that they stick on their bathroom mirror. I have a right to pleasure. And people who have had abusive backgrounds, and by abusive background, I don't just mean, violence. I mean, being made to feel shame for living in their body, wanting pleasure, wanting connection. That's not something to feel ashamed about. And we need to make a space where someone can overcome that worry right away. One of the things that we try to talk about, because we never, ever know what the question is going to be when someone walks in the door. It's understandable that it seems like we might. We see somebody who looks a particular way come in. They're a particular age range. Maybe your gaydar goes off. Maybe you think you know what they're up to. This would also be a good time for me to do a PSA that says there's no such thing as gay sex or straight sex. There's sex and different people have it in different ways. But we don't know what that way is when they walk in. And we might not know when they walk out because they need to be willing to tell us. It really needs to be relevant, that or they're chatty. And we need to know that we know as much about these products as possible, what they're good for, how to explore with them, how to talk about them. And then if they have specialist questions, then maybe we learn what's in their pants because it's not any of our business until it is. Yeah. And they have to be the one to make it that way. So even if what they think we're going to do is ask them a whole bunch of super personal questions, there's an on-ramp to that. If that's necessary for them to choose whatever it is that they would like to explore. My wonderful colleague for many years, Andy, used to talk about Sharpie Guy. If Sharpie Guy comes into a store like ours, we are going to figure out that he's been playing with a Sharpie anally, and that's not safe. But it is something lying around the house, which is why everybody, you need sex stores in your neighborhood so that you're not racing around your house trying to put it through the filter of, is this safe for this purpose? Because once you're running around the house, safety might not be the first thing on your mind. And so then we need to say, all right, well, here are the anal toys. This is why they're shaped this way. It's a safety issue. I used to always take the tiny little mini vibes that people would bring up to the counter, and I would be ringing them up, and I would say, now, just so you know, this isn't safe to use anally. And they would go, why not? It's like, well, and I would explain, because even in sex ed, we don't learn about flanges, do we? We barely learn about lube. Maybe in college, sure. Not everyone goes to college. Not everyone gets access to this.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things that are important here that we could talk about. And I want to go back to something that you said, which was that, you can't always predict the question in advance that somebody's going to ask. I mean, I know it might be tempting to make assumptions based on the way someone looks or appears when they come into the store about what it is that they might be looking for. But yeah, you never know what's going to come out of their mouth. However, I'm sure you hear a lot of the same questions over and over and over again. And I'm curious, have the kinds of questions people are asking when they come into the shop, have they changed over the years, or are they still asking the same sorts of things? When it comes to great sex, wetter is better. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to Soaking Wet from VB Health. It's the world's first probiotic specifically designed for vaginal and vulva health and wellness. Soaking Wet is a doctor-formulated blend of prebiotics, probiotics, and vitamins specifically designed to restore balance down there and increase lubrication. This isn't just about health, it's also about pleasure. VB Health has a simple mission, creating supplements that work with scientifically backed ingredients. They take quality seriously too. Each batch that is produced is tested by 2 separate third-party laboratories for safety and effectiveness. They even share their third-party lab results publicly, which is rare. Make every encounter slipperier, sexier, and downright sensational. It's time to get soaking wet and keep the good times coming, literally. And the best part? Soaking Wet is formulated by doctors at VB Health. Visit soakingwet.com and use code JUSTIN for 10% off, or click the link in the show notes. What do you learn when you track 136,000 erections? A heck of a lot. And FirmTech is using that breakthrough data to transform men's sexual health. Here's why that matters. ED is usually treated by guesswork, but FirmTech's Tech Ring finally gives men and their doctors real data. How firm you're getting, how long you're staying there, whether your medications are working, and whether things like pumps, PRP, or shockwave therapy will actually do anything for you. It can even help optimize your dosing for ED meds, and they've got the science to back all of this up. But my favorite part is that the Tech Ring doesn't just measure erections, it improves them. FirmTech's design helps keep more blood in the penis, giving you harder erections, more confidence, and more intense orgasms. In fact, studies show that for certain men, it performs on par with taking 10 milligrams of tadalafil. Remember, pills help get blood in, rings help keep it there. And FirmTech's database revealed something big. For most guys, fading erections aren't dysfunction, they're venous leak. You get hard, and then you lose it. The Tech Ring can spot that early, long before you consciously notice it. It can also flag cardiovascular-related ED, which is the kind that you really want to pay attention to. The bottom line is that we're all somewhere on the spectrum from erectile fitness to erectile dysfunction. FirmTech gives you the tools and the data to stop or even reverse that trend. Check the show notes for the link and save 15% off your FirmTech order by using Justin15 as the discount code. Stay fit, stay firm.
Yes and no is the answer, because the same questions that were on people's mind decades ago are still on people's mind. We used to talk about this at San Francisco Sex Information too, which I was part of before I was even part of Good Vibrations. The most common question we got is this normal? Mm-hmm. Is this desire, this behavior normal? And comparing yourself to everybody else, well, it's not happening any less in the influencer age, is it?
Nope.
It's one of the things, especially with young people, it's one of the things that specialists and academics are worried about the kind of online access. It's become so ubiquitous. We didn't have that then, but we did have the notion that there was normativity and that you had to somehow make peace with it. And many people thought that that meant knuckle under to it. Some of us were like, yeah, no, I think I'll go be a sexologist and talk about this all the time for the rest of my life. And that's making peace in a whole different way, right? But not everybody does that or is given the opportunity or even thinks that there's an option to step away from what they have been trained to think is a normal way of being. There's a related question that's very, very common still. What's the best one? Mm-hmm. What's the best item? What's the best vibrator? What's the best, et cetera? And we have to explain there is no one best for everybody. People have different sensation tolerances and enjoyments. People find that this one is too mild, but other people might find this one is too focused. You have to think about what you enjoy already. And if people don't enjoy anything already, that's the hard part, right? Yep. But there are doors to open nevertheless. And one of them is exactly what Joni Blank was up against when she got her big brainstorm in 1970, whenever it was, which is make a space where people have permission to think about what they might like to try, do, experience, how they might like to be in relationship. All of that is related to our sexual wellness and enjoyment. It's not a different thing. Not everybody chooses the same ways of being in relationship with their sexuality, because plenty of people do that all by themselves and never again connect up with another person. It's actually not a rule that you have to. Mm-hmm. So we want to make the possibilities be as endless as the person needs them to be without miring them in the decision point. We don't want them to get their feet all muddy with, they said I could do anything I wanted. I don't even know. And helping take people through a little tour of what's in the store. And people can do this online too. It's a little different. You don't have a guide in the same way. I'm especially talking about brick and mortar stores here, where you can walk inside and have an experience that's different from the experience that you have outside or other experiences that you might have online, because we do everything online now. It's not the same though, as having a human being there that you can ask a question and a follow-up. It's just not. So if someone is able to come in and just get shown around, they'll often sort of zoom in on something that looks like it might be fun, a size or a shape that they imagine they would enjoy. We have all the vibrators plugged in, charged up, turned on, batteried up if they still take batteries. Most don't anymore, but you can put them in the palm of your hand and go, oh, that's stronger than that one. And maybe that's an important thing for you to think about. Maybe you think that vibration means one thing. It doesn't. It means a lot of things. And of course, there are sex toys that aren't vibrators. And plenty of people think that vibrators are only for women. And of course, at Good Vibes, part of the we don't know what's in your pants principle is there are probably going to be more than two people with non-binary gender identities coming through in the course of any given day. We don't know. They'll tell us if we need to know. And we don't want to make assumptions, but people with penises, whatever their sense of their own sexual orientation and gender identity, often are surprised to learn that vibrators are for them too, if they enjoy that sensation. But that's the same for others who, are like, what you need is a vibrator because you can't come any other way because the orgasm deficit is, and I'm not trying to make fun of that. That's an insight that we needed and that we all need to take seriously. But the orgasm gap is only curable by a vibrator if somebody likes the sensation of the vibrator. And we don't have to all be the same way. We are not all the same way.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. Not every sex toy is for everybody. And a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about toys. And I don't work in a sex shop, but I get asked a lot of the same questions as you, such as, what's the best lube? Or what toy is going to give me the most intense and strongest and most powerful orgasm? And it's like, well, what do you like? What are you planning to do with this toy?
Right.
So these are really hard questions to answer unless that person actually knows what it is that they want to explore or do. And so, yeah, it can be kind of tough to answer those questions sometimes.
We get people walking in who have read all about toys all over online, and they are very well informed, and yet they haven't felt the way it vibes yet, right?
Yep.
And they, that's a reason to come into a store. And we also have people who don't have any idea that there are this many vibrators. How do you choose? You choose by thinking about what differentiates them and then trying to lay that over what do you like when somebody touches you on the vulva, say, with the palm of their hand and moves a hand around, whether it's you or someone else. Does that feel like enough extra sensation for you to get warmed up? Or do you like it when somebody touches your clit, if that's what you got, and moves the finger around? Well, that's a difference between a palm style or a wand vibrator and a little bitty vibrator with a focused tip. At least in part, that's the difference. It's not the same experience, but they're comparable in some ways. So we can think it through like that with people if they want to share that level of detail with us. And if they don't want to tell us anything, we can use the always useful words, some, many, and most, to help people understand the differences between what they think everybody will respond to, they don't, and what some people like, but not everyone does. They do, but they don't. It helps open our minds a little bit to the kinds of differences that, we can talk more about on a big picture philosophical level. But in a sex store, we're sort of bringing it down to earth. It's the as above, so below question about how we understand where we fit in the sexual spectra. And there are so many spectra now these days that are being addressed that I feel like on one level, all we can do, plenty of people are trying to close this whole conversation down as much as possible, just ratchet it down. I think we all need to figure out where we can best serve the conversation because it's happening for a reason. Mm-hmm. Because plenty of people who didn't get enough information and haven't had enough options to explore are having a rough time with their sexuality, their relationships, their self-esteem sometimes, and it doesn't have to be that way.
It does not. Now, Good Vibrations claims that most of their sales associates receive more sex education than your average physician.
I think I came up with that.
And if they are, that's great. But I wanted to ask, what kinds of information and what kinds of training do you do for employees to make sure that they're really knowledgeable about the products and will be able to answer the questions that people have when they come in?
Well, I'll start by saying that I started saying this about 30 years ago when we talked to doctors who came in to look around and see what was in there in the sex store. We would hear often, oh yeah, we had one class in that. Not toys. Sexual functioning. And of course, in doctor land, that doesn't usually mean having an orgasm. These days, it's a little more likely that people will get more. It's more okay to talk and think and research about this now than it used to be, right? But at the training, we give people some of the kind of history that I've shared with you, just so that they understand that they didn't come into just any place where vibrators were for sale, that we have a reason for being. We have a mission. We have a purpose to extend information as well as good quality stuff. And that's where they came into work. And then what's human anatomy like? What are pleasure parts like? I talk about, and I learned this from my partner, Robert Morgan Lawrence. I talk about homologs and how the sexes are not, in fact, opposite. We've got neurology in almost all of our bodies that derives from the same place in utero and as we grow and works functionally similarly. We all use it a little differently. It feels a little different to us, perhaps, but there it all is. And so we don't have to get caught in this men and women are opposites business. We don't get to, I can't possibly know what they're experiencing, so I'm not even going to try business. None of that. None of that's real. It can be thought of in a whole different way that brings us closer together and helps us communicate better. Then, what are some of the ways that we can communicate in a sex positive fashion? This is where you don't know what's in their pants until they tell you comes in. You might think they look like your mother. They might be doing something real different from your mother. You don't know what your mother's doing either. part comes in so that we can try to accept everybody who comes in the door as an individual who will find the right level with us if we're open to that. We talk about toys and how they work. We talk about all the different kinds of toys, the anal toys, penis sleeves, or whatever you got and whatever you call it, as I like to say, and all the different ways that the stuff that we sell interacts and integrates with the information about anatomy and arousal. Because if we don't learn about the anatomy, arousal, orgasm cycle, or the multiple cycles, because it's not all one thing. Thanks, Masters and Johnson, for getting us going, right? But that's not the end of the discussion. If we can't integrate this with that, then we haven't done the thing Joni Blank sought to do by having good stuff and good information that allows people to go out and learn on their own. Because what is masturbation but solo lifelong learning if somebody does it for their whole lives, which many people do. So we don't know if somebody's only going to masturbate with the thing, which is why we say, you may not choose to use this anally, but what about that person you're going to have a date with in 3 years? And they're like, you know what, I would really like to try. Yeah, I feel so comfortable with you. Let's just try that. And you go, oh, I have this little vibrator. Don't use that vibrator. We want people, I think, certainly I want this, to walk out having gotten a few of the secrets that those of us who specialize in this stuff learn over the course of our careers that most people never have a chance to talk about ever. Mm-hmm. I want people to have a little more permission and joy, too, to talk about stuff like that, because it's like a stone in the water. The ripples go out in your relationship, your pleasure, your ability to listen to your body. It's just good stuff. And sex can lead us there. It's probably not the only place it can, but I know that it is a place that can. And there are not many people who get as much of that as I think we all deserve if we're interested.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And we'd all do well to get a little bit more permission when it comes to talking about sex and fantasies and exploring our sexuality. And to the extent that visiting a sex shop can help you do that, all the better.
I really want people to bring their person if they have a person. Don't just buy them a big old vibrator or dildo because you think they need a big thing because they're not having orgasms there. No, that's not from sex ed class. Come on in, look around, have some lunch, take your time, check it out, see what it's like to get more comfortable in that relationship, not just with us, but with the person that you'll likely be using the toy with. Here we are right before the winter holidays talking about something that we see every single year, which is, I've got to get the biggest dildo for my partner. No, you don't. You need a gift card, a nice card with I love you in it, and you need to come on in and walk around as long as it takes to feel like you're comfortable in here with us, and especially with your person.
Well, that reminds me, Carol, of something I've said many times before on the show, which is that sometimes your eyes are bigger than your hole, right? So You don't necessarily need the biggest dildo that's out there.
And particularly, you do not need to diagnose somebody else the biggest dildo. That's true. Unless you're in, BDSM land, if you've just gone to see Pillion and you're like, all right, we're going to change it up over here. That's another question. That's another show, another topic. Most people aren't there yet, and we want to meet people where they are.
So thank you so much for this amazing conversation. It was a pleasure to have you here. Can you please tell my listeners where they can go to learn more about you and your work?
Sure. I have not one, but 2 Instagrams, and I'm trying to figure out how to merge them into one, but you can find Carol Queen, PhD, easily enough. I'm on Blue Sky. I used to be on Twitter, but you know what happened there, so I don't go back that often. I've got a Facebook page, and I can also be found through a link at the Good Vibes website, goodvibes.com, where people can hit the button and it sends an email to me. And there's somewhere out there, there's some kind of a website that I haven't had a chance to do anything new to in years and years ago, but it's got some things, carolqueen.com.
Well, thank you again so much for your time. I'll be sure to include links to all of that in the show notes.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for listening. To keep up with new episodes of this podcast, visit my website, Sex and Psychology, at sexandpsychology.com, or subscribe on your favorite platform, where I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please consider becoming a Sex and Psychology Premium subscriber to enjoy ad-free listening for just $3.99 a month. You can also follow me on social media for daily sex research updates. I'm on Blue Sky and X at Justin Lehmiller and Instagram at Justin J. Lehmiller. Also, be sure to check out my book, Tell Me What You Want. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.